The announcement landed like a thunderclap inside Buckingham Palace, unexpected, symbolic, and impossible to ignore. In an official statement released quietly through palace channels, it was confirmed. Prince George had been granted a historic and highly symbolic royal title, years earlier than tradition would suggest. The title, long associated with heirs on the path to kingship, wasn't just ceremonial. It was a message, a signal to the world and to the family within the palace walls about where the future of the monarchy truly lies. But while the public rejoiced and headlines celebrated the young lion steps forward, one figure behind the scenes was said to have completely lost control: Queen Camilla. Not because the title went to George, but because it didn't go to her grandson. For months, perhaps even years, Camilla had lobbied privately to have one of her grandchildren brought more formally into the royal fold. Charles, sympathetic and soft-spoken as ever, had promised discussions, a minor dukedom, a barony, a ceremonial title, something. She'd envisioned a future where her bloodline wasn't just adjacent to the monarchy but woven into it. But with this move, George being elevated without so much as a courtesy call to Camilla, those hopes were shattered. And to her, it wasn't just a disappointment, it was a humiliation, a public declaration that her line will never matter, that Diana's legacy through William and George would always come first, that no matter the crown on her head, Camilla would forever be the outsider, the unwanted chapter in a story already written. Sources say Camilla erupted in private, accusing aides of betrayal, slamming the phone on Charles, and calling Kate dangerous and calculating. But outside the palace, the message couldn't have been clearer. Prince George wasn't just being honored, he was being positioned, groomed not just as a future king, but as the symbolic heart of the royal family. A child of Diana's bloodline, a bridge to the people, a living reminder of everything Camilla had spent years trying to eclipse. And in that moment, behind the palace's golden gates, a silent war exploded. This is the story of the title that tore open old wounds, exposed hidden rivalries, and signaled the rise of Diana's true heir, and how Queen Camilla completely lost it. The morning it happened, the Royal Rota journalists were expecting a typical update, perhaps a public engagement recap, or a soft photo drop of the Wales children in the countryside. Nothing prepared them for the seismic jolt that came instead. In a statement posted without ceremony on the official royal website, and later confirmed by multiple palace correspondents, Prince George was formally granted the title Duke of Cambridge and Rothsay-in-Waiting. It was an unprecedented move. This wasn't just a child receiving an honorary nickname. It was the resurrection and repurposing of titles steeped in historical weight, titles closely linked with the lineage of power, legacy, and eventual kingship. The dual styling, linking both England and Scotland, was no accident. Insiders whispered that it was William's direct input, ensuring his son was seen as a unifier of the realm, a modern heir who bridges tradition and a post-Brexit fractured kingdom. But it wasn't the public who was caught most off guard. It was Camilla. Because just days earlier, she had attended a private Windsor family event with her grandchildren in tow, including her eldest grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles. By all accounts, it had been a cordial afternoon. George and Freddie had even been photographed together, smiling, laughing, the image of blended family harmony. And yet, within 72 hours of that seemingly innocent photo opportunity, Prince George had been elevated, while Camilla's grandson, who had reportedly been in quiet discussions to receive a minor courtesy title, was left completely out of the announcement. No mention, no acknowledgement, nothing. According to a senior palace aide, Camilla learned of George's title the same way the public did, through a ping on her phone as the press release went live. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She kept asking, "Why didn't they consult us? Why wasn't I told?" One insider recounted. She genuinely believed anything would be granted to her grandson around the same time. But there was no mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated move, timed to perfection. Sources close to Prince William and Princess Kate say the decision had been months in the making. The late Queen Elizabeth had reportedly discussed such early honors for heirs during her final years, especially as public appetite for tradition began to waver. With King Charles now battling recurring health concerns, William decided it was time to cement George's visibility, not just as a boy destined to be king, but as a figure of continuity and trust. And doing it now, early, boldly, was a statement in itself. A statement that the House of Windsor would not drift into obscurity. And perhaps a subtle rebuke to Camilla's quiet but persistent campaign to secure a legacy for her own bloodline. In private, Camilla had grown increasingly confident in recent years. With Charles crowned and her own image somewhat rehabilitated in the press, she began pushing the idea, never publicly, always through whispers, that perhaps her grandchildren should be included in the future ceremonial structure of the monarchy. Nothing scandalous, just a small dukedom, a lifetime courtesy title, a seat at the royal table. Something. But William and Kate, particularly Kate, had always kept their stance silent and firm. The crown is not for sale. Legacy is not inherited by marriage, and Diana's line will not be diluted. The release of George's title was proof. The visual was unmistakable. A blonde-haired boy, shy but charming, styled in a navy blue blazer, walking alongside his mother in newly surfaced photos, the press calling him a young leader in the making. And in the background, almost symbolically, Camilla's grandson was nowhere to be seen. The public may not have understood the full history of these titles, but they understood the message. The future had been chosen, and the line between royal blood and royal privilege had just been drawn in stone. The press were still buzzing when the Queen Consort's fury erupted behind the palace doors. According to multiple palace aides, Queen Camilla was not just blindsided by Prince George's elevation. She took it as a personal betrayal. What had been framed publicly as a graceful gesture to honor a future king, she saw as a ruthless reminder of her place, forever second tier, forever outside the true royal bloodline. Insiders say Camilla was informed only minutes before the press release went live, and not by Charles or William, but by her private secretary, reading directly from the embargoed memo. Her face reportedly dropped, and then, in a voice sharp enough to silence the entire room, she snapped, "He's not even my blood!" The words cut through the stillness like a dagger. It wasn't just frustration, it was rage. Decades of being treated like a tolerated guest in the house she now technically ruled, all boiled over in a single moment. Her hands reportedly trembled as she threw the statement onto her desk, pacing in her sitting room at Clarence House, muttering about Kate's games and Diana's shadow still pulling the strings. But the moment that broke her, according to one staff member, was when her grandson asked the question. Earlier that morning, young Freddie, her oldest grandson through Tom Parker Bowles, had asked innocently over breakfast, "Gran, does that mean I get a title too?" Camilla froze. She couldn't answer. She reportedly forced a smile, stood up, and left the room. Moments later, behind closed doors, she broke down. According to a senior aide, the Queen Consort sobbed for nearly 20 minutes, whispering again and again, "I've spent my life fighting to be part of this family, and they still treat me like a mistake." To Camilla, this wasn't just about a title. It was a calculated message that her family, her bloodline would never be part of the monarchy's true legacy, that Diana's children and grandchildren would always be first, that no matter what crown she wore, she was still the outsider. Later that day, she called Charles, expecting support. But sources say the king was evasive, deflecting, asking her to focus on the bigger picture and not get caught up in details. It only deepened the wound. "It's always about Diana," she reportedly told a close friend over the phone that evening. "Even now, even through him, they've turned George into her little ghost, and I'm expected to clap along like it's not another knife in the back." The fury didn't end there. Camilla began lashing out at staff, demanding meetings with the Lord Chamberlain and her PR advisors. She allegedly told her communications chief to find a way to remind people who else is part of this family, clearly alluding to her grandchildren. But the palace refused to issue any statement. The damage was already done, and attempting to publicly equate George's elevation with Camilla's step-grandchildren would only inflame the narrative further. Behind the scenes, aides were rattled. One palace insider remarked, "It wasn't just anger, it was desperation. She's losing grip, not just on Charles, but on how the monarchy moves without her." And for the Queen Consort, nothing stung more than knowing the entire world was watching George rise, while her own family remained invisible. To the public, Prince George's new title seemed like a sweet ceremonial gesture, an early honor for the boy who would one day become king. But behind the walls of Kensington Palace and the halls of Buckingham, the decision was anything but casual. It was strategic, deliberate, timed to perfection. According to multiple royal aides, the move to grant George the title of Duke of Cambridge and Rothesay in waiting had been in quiet discussion for over a year, spearheaded by Prince William and supported unequivocally by Princess Catherine. Their reasoning was clear. With King Charles's health concerns growing more visible by the day and the public trust in the monarchy at a fragile tipping point, the next generation needed to step into view now. But this wasn't just about preparing George for the throne. It was about staking a claim to the future, one that was rooted in legacy, loyalty, and blood. William had reportedly grown wary of how blurred the lines had become in recent years. Camilla, bolstered by her new title as queen and riding a PR wave of rehabilitation, had begun making subtle moves, attending more state functions alone, pushing for her family's presence at events, even suggesting her grandchildren accompany her to public appearances. It had raised eyebrows, and behind the scenes, it had raised alarms. One senior palace source confided, there was concern that Camilla's camp was trying to quietly shift the center of gravity, reframing the monarchy as something blended. That's not what the monarchy is. William and Kate knew they had to send a message, and that message came through George. By awarding him such a historically rich title at a young age, the Waleses weren't just preparing their son for public duty, they were placing him front and center in the royal narrative. A child of Diana's bloodline, the firstborn of the future king, the face of a monarchy built on continuity, not compromise. Even the title itself was symbolic. The Duke of Cambridge had belonged to William before becoming Prince of Wales, and Duke of Rothesay is the traditional Scottish title held by the heir apparent. By naming George in waiting, William made it clear, the future is unfolding now, and there is no room for confusion about who that future belongs to. Sources close to William and Kate insist the decision was not made to spite Camilla, but neither was it made to appease her. In fact, they were advised specifically not to consult her. "This was a direct House of Wales decision," said a royal staffer, "and they wanted to keep it that way. No interference, no lobbying, no negotiation." That stance, while politically astute, only deepened the rift between the two royal households. Camilla reportedly felt blindsided, but insiders argue she had long misunderstood her place. While Charles may be king, and while Camilla may wear a crown, titles within the core bloodline have never been up for negotiation. One constitutional expert put it bluntly in a recent televised segment: Camilla's grandchildren are not royal. They're not in the line of succession. They hold no official status. This isn't favoritism. It's simply how the monarchy works. Still, that didn't stop the emotional fallout. For Camilla, it felt like a slap in the face. For William and Kate, it was simply time to protect what matters, not through confrontation, but through clarity. And for Prince George, barely into his teens, it marked the start of something far greater than just a name. It was his quiet coronation in the court of public opinion, the first step toward a destiny already written in gold and in blood. As Queen Camilla's fury continued to ripple through the palace corridors, there was one voice she waited to hear above all others: King Charles's. But it never came. No public statement, no private reassurance, no defense, only silence. And for Camilla, that silence said everything. In the hours following the announcement of Prince George's new title, the Queen Consort reportedly attempted to reach her husband multiple times. Aides confirmed she made at least 3 calls to his private line and requested an urgent in-person meeting. But Charles, already in a fragile state due to ongoing health treatments, was not to be disturbed, according to his medical advisors. That didn't sit well with Camilla. To her, this wasn't just a family matter. It was a matter of rank, of public optics, and of personal loyalty. She had stood by Charles through decades of disgrace, through scandal, and through a coronation that many believed she should never have had. And now, when her family had been publicly sidelined and humiliated, she expected him to stand by her. He didn't. Instead, Charles reportedly responded through his aides, suggesting she let the issue settle and not make this bigger than it needs to be. The words only deepened the wound. She felt abandoned, a royal insider shared. She expected him to push back against William, to assert his authority, to make it clear that the monarchy includes her family too. But he wouldn't do it. He backed off. The truth was, Charles did know about the decision in advance. He had been briefed, perhaps out of courtesy more than obligation. And while he didn't directly orchestrate the move, he didn't stop it either. Sources close to the king revealed that Charles was exhausted by conflict and had no desire to interfere in William and Kate's long-term strategy for their son. He's at the stage where he wants peace, not politics, one aide noted. But that peace has come at the cost of defending his wife. For Camilla, the emotional fallout was enormous. She had always counted on Charles to be her quiet shield. The man who had fought so hard to bring her into the royal fold now seemed unwilling to protect her place in it. Worse still, it mirrored a pattern she knew all too well. During the height of the Diana years, Charles was infamous for his emotional withdrawal. He avoided confrontation, let advisors do the talking, let problems cool off rather than addressing them head-on. Camilla had seen it then, when Diana cried behind closed doors and Charles slipped away for his daily walk. And now, decades later, she was the one left behind. Some within the palace interpreted his silence as passive approval of George's elevation. Others said it was calculated, a subtle way of signaling to William and Kate that he wouldn't interfere with their vision. But to Camilla, it felt like betrayal. He didn't even try, she reportedly told a close friend. He let them humiliate me and my family, and he just folded. Those words were never meant to be public, but in a royal household built on leaks, they were inevitable. And when they reached William's camp, the message was received. Camilla was unraveling, and Charles was retreating. The queen consort may have had the crown, but in the storm that followed George's rise, the king she needed most had gone quiet. And sometimes silence screams louder than anything else. The palace may have stayed silent, but the public wasted no time in making their voice heard. The moment Prince George's new title was announced, social media platforms erupted, not just with praise, but with something far more powerful: emotional allegiance. Across Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, the phrase began to trend: Diana's grandson. To the public, the significance of the title wasn't rooted in royal protocol. It wasn't about peerage traditions or hereditary custom. It was about symbolism. Prince George, young and still shy in public, suddenly became more than the future king. He became the living embodiment of Princess Diana's legacy. Fan accounts quickly shared touching edits of Diana holding baby William alongside images of Kate walking hand in hand with George. Captions like, "The crown comes full circle and the Queen of Hearts lives on" went viral. One video featuring clips of Diana's iconic charity work intercut with George's public appearances hit over 5 million views in 48 hours. The music? Elton John's "Candle in the Wind." But it wasn't just nostalgia driving the movement. It was conviction. People weren't just celebrating George, they were taking sides. Camilla, already a controversial figure, became the target of renewed online scrutiny. Old clips resurfaced of her early tabloid scandals, alongside present-day headlines of her perceived efforts to secure roles for her grandchildren. The narrative practically wrote itself. The once vilified mistress, now queen, bitter over being pushed aside by the legacy of a woman the nation still mourned and still loved. "They'll never let Diana rest," one royal commentator said during a live broadcast, "because she's more than history, she's heart, and the people feel that every time they see George smile." Polls soon followed. A YouGov Snap poll conducted just 3 days after the title announcement showed 72% of respondents supported the decision to elevate George early. 61% described George as a direct reflection of Diana's values. Only 18% believed Camilla's family should receive any formal royal titles. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. In public perception, George was not just the heir. He was the next generation of Diana's moral legacy: calm, innocent, symbolic of what the monarchy could become. Meanwhile, Camilla was framed as everything the public still resisted: privilege without authenticity, power without heart, and worst of all, a reminder of the pain that never quite faded after Diana's death. Even traditional press outlets picked up on the shift. The Telegraph called George the monarchy's modern heart. The Guardian ran a piece titled "Why George, Why Now?" reclaiming Diana's line. And the Daily Mail, typically pro-Charles, published a shock editorial asking, "Has Queen Camilla overplayed her hand?" Palace insiders scrambled to contain the narrative. Advisors urged Camilla to make a low-key public appearance with her grandchildren to soften the growing backlash, but she reportedly refused. She believed, perhaps correctly, that no image, no smile, no statement could compete with the symbolism of Diana's bloodline ascending again. For the public, the royal family had drawn a line. On one side, legacy, duty, and direct heritage, embodied by William, Kate, and George. On the other, a queen consort desperately clinging to relevance, overshadowed by a ghost she could never quite outrun. And for better or worse, the people made their choice. They chose Diana's grandson. They chose continuity over controversy. They chose the boy who didn't ask for power, but inherited the people's love anyway. And in doing so, they reshaped the monarchy, not by blood, not by title, but by loyalty. In the centuries-old game of monarchy, Titles have always held more weight than mere names. They are signals of favor, of power, of legacy. And with the early elevation of Prince George, the royal family didn't just hand a child a new title. They drew a line in history. It was a choice, not of politics or ceremony, but of blood. Camilla may wear the crown, but her influence was always conditional, tied not to lineage, but to proximity. She married into power, but she could never produce it. And when that power was tested, when her grandson was passed over without explanation, while George stepped into the spotlight, the illusion shattered. Because at its core, the monarchy is built on something Camilla will never possess: unbroken royal blood. The direct line from sovereign to sovereign, the soul of the institution. Diana's blood flows through Prince William, and now through Prince George. That's why this moment matters. George's title wasn't simply a reward, it was a reminder that despite the modern optics, the documentaries, and the PR campaigns, the crown still honors legacy over marriage. Still prioritizes those born into destiny, not those who negotiated their way into it. And in doing so, the monarchy has made its future clear. A future led by a boy who carries the quiet strength of his father, the unwavering grace of his mother, and the indelible shadow of a grandmother whose spirit never left the palace walls. Diana may be gone, but in George, the people see her smile, her softness, her hope. Meanwhile, Camilla is left behind, not just politically, but emotionally, not by scandal or decree, but by something far more powerful: the will of the people. Because in the end, this wasn't just about one boy getting a title. It was about the monarchy choosing a direction. And this time, that direction points not toward compromise or reinvention, but toward pure, untouchable legacy. The kind that doesn't need permission, the kind that doesn't ask for love, the kind that's born with a crown already waiting. And his name is George.